We spend time talking to other automotive companies.
CNBC, the most trusted news source.
We'll have some good news, but ultimately we don't see them hitting their guidance. I still think about 85K is where they hit. And I think it's some good news before bad news, because ultimately second half is going to be the key. And that's an Everest-like battle to hit those numbers for the year. And that's really the issue for investors right now. It's that profitability in second half numbers, especially even if you get some good news in 2Q. Yeah, I think it's a fork in the road situation over the next 6 months, because really it comes down to, can they sustain Model 3 growth? What does profitability look like? We continue to think if no profitability, they'll have to raise another $1 to $2 billion more of capital. So that's why right now you see such divergence in terms of the view of Tesla. Look, in my opinion, for them to hit that year-end number is going to be a significant challenge. I think right now it's a prove me stock for the bulls.
Jed, I mean, prove you, I don't know, 394. It sounds like they've already proven it to you.
Yeah, listen, I think it's a binary stock here.
The market is concerned about demand levels, and last night didn't do anything to alleviate that.
Is it just Tony worries about Model 3 and this new model, or is it worries about demand for all Tesla vehicles right now? And has there really been a significant softening?
Certainly in the first couple months of the year, there has been significant softening, and that's why I think we saw Tesla reduce prices, and that was not only the Model 3, but also the Model S and X. And obviously, when you reduce prices, that makes it much more difficult to make money.
What do you tell clients who ask, look, Volkswagen says they're going to unleash 90 new EVs over the next several years, and this standard Y isn't coming until, what, fall 2021? When does competition really raise its head?
I believe it's the least of Elon Musk and Tesla's problems. You just had a major miss in the first quarter. The S and the X combined were 12,000 units sold. The consensus was 20. That's a 40% miss. They were down 50%. The Model 3, if you back out some information from the press release, that was down 50% quarter over quarter. I believe demand has peaked in the U.S., and Tesla still has a big inventory problem.
Gabe, from your bearish perspective, what's going on with the numbers? Do you think they've got a real demand problem?
Well, I totally disagree that the S and the X are just a sideshow. It was about an $800 million revenue miss, or most of the miss in Joe's model. And 2 months ago, Joe and I were here on CNBC. I said that on Twitter and other places, you could find pictures of lots that were real of thousands and thousands of Tesla cars, excess inventory, all over the country. And as we went through the quarter, you could check state registration data, foreign country registration data. There's a lot of hedge fund managers and, heck, even retail investors that do that on Twitter. Joe's got his S and X numbers bumping back up from the 12,000 this quarter to 17 next quarter, 23 in the fourth quarter, holding an average price of over $100,000. And I'm just wondering, what does he see that's changing, and what is he going to change about his research process so that he doesn't miss by 40% next quarter?
Munster, founder of Loop Ventures. I guess it was coming, wasn't it, Gene?
Yeah, it's all relative to timing, Joe. Based on that call, absolutely it was coming. 6 months ago, we would have not expected this. But essentially, the company, two things have happened. One is that the order flow has dipped after the Model 3 launch. So I think even the company maybe has some questions about what ultimately demand is going to be this year. So that's new in the last few months. And then separately, this Lyft and Uber and focus on autonomy bid that's out there. And the company was astute to move to capitalize on that with their autonomy event. So I think that riding on the tails of that and some of the demos that they've shown, you're absolutely right, is this was the writing more recently was on the wall.
It feels like, Gene, bulls and bears can walk away with this with an argument for their cases. I mean, bulls will say, oh, yeah, this is great because this will allow Tesla to spend money, get that Shanghai factory up and running without worries about its cash burn. And the bears will say, you know what, this is an admission that they are concerned about demand, that they need this capital desperately. Where do you fall?
Well, the debate's going to continue to rage on, Melissa, no doubt. But I think that this does effectively de-risk the business. I want to put some perspective on that. The company has $2.2 billion in cash. If they raise $2 billion, now they haven't raised that yet, but assuming they do raise that, that effectively doubles what their working capital needs are. So just to fund the growth, it's expensive to scale an automotive manufacturing. They need about $2 billion in the bank. So effectively that gives them, call it a 100% cushion. That's one way to think about it. So to put that demand trajectory into perspective here is that their guidance is for 360 to 400,000 vehicles this year. If they do raise the $4 billion, they could deliver somewhere between 275 and 300,000 vehicles for the next 2 years and be solvent. So that will probably give the bulls a little bit of breathing room here, but won't extinguish the bear case.
Gene, it's never good to talk about a company and then use the word solvent just as it raises questions unto itself. But my question to you is whether you think that there is a demand problem here. Is there a long-term demand problem? This no longer, I'm not sure there's a supply problem right now.
No, manufacturing has ticked up. I was recently at the factory, and it is, the line is moving along at a good clip. So I think that their manufacturing bottlenecks have been relieved. So you are correct, Andrew, that they've worked through that. The demand question, I feel strongly that there's not a long-term demand question. Vehicles simply should not be gas-powered. It's a little bit absurd on many levels, which we won't get into. But if you can take that for the future, that cars will be electrified, we know that eventually, call it 70 million vehicles will be electric. We got called 1 or 2 million last year globally were electric. The question is, on that solvency piece, is what is the slope of that curve? There was an unprecedented pent-up demand for Model 3. This is called a 3-year buildup of demand.
Right.
So we really don't know what demand is. I really don't know what demand is. We really don't know what demand is.
The question is, was that demand built up, and was that demand relieved at the end of 2018? I mean, that's the fundamental question here, right? And yeah. I'm with you. I think that a lot of people want to buy electric cars into the future. That is a working trend. The question is the models that Tesla has, without having to redo the line all over again, by the way, to actually refresh some of these cars, which haven't been refreshed in quite some time, minus the Model 3, of course, is there that much investment that necessarily has to be made to create additional demand at this point?
No, this is the slow part of the demand curve, which we're going to start to ease into. And so I agree with you. I don't know what the underlying demand is going to be for this year because of all that pent-up demand that was effectively relieved. We're below their guidance. They've guided 360 to 400. We're at 340. So we think that they're going to miss that number. But the reason why this capital raise is so important is that this basically is, it could be an emission, it could be an insurance policy, but by buying a company like this a couple of years to navigate, I think it's critical as you essentially buy time to really ride this curve. And one just thought on the curve is we spend time talking to other automotive companies, and we do a lot of analysis on the different specs and what they're doing. And I think it's safe to say is that Tesla has called a 3 or 4 year lead on the competition, and so I think that's important.
Gene, thanks. Gene Munster, and I'm sure Gene caught. Musk is going to buy up to 42,000 shares for $10 million, 420, 42,000. So that number comes up once again.
Oh my God, that's interesting.
I mean, it's kind of cheeky, right?